The truth is, most bandsaw problems are blade-related problems, and this whole thing about blade drift is really a symptom of using the wrong blade, or using a dull one. Here's the thing about blades. You don't want to use a blade that has any more than 3 teeth per inch, no matter what size the blade is or what task you're using it for. If the blade is too fine, the gullets will pack with chips, the blade will start to resist the cut and twist sideways. That's blade drift. And this problem also happens or even gets worse if the blade is dull. So if you've been delaying changing your bandsaw blade, let's do that right now. You're going to be amazed at how well the bandsaw will cut. Okay, start by unplugging the saw. Now you need to retract all of the blade guides. Pull away the blocks and dial back that thrust bearing. Now pull back the whole guide block assembly. Now raise those guides up to their highest position. Make sure you do all the same things with the lower guides too. Okay, now you can remove the throat plate and that little plug in the side of the saw table that keeps the two halves of the table aligned. Now open up the doors and turn that tension crank until the blade is completely loose. Now the blade can come off the wheels. You're going to need to make a right turn and thread it out of the slot in the table. Take a moment to inspect the bandsaw tires while you have the chance. You want to make sure they're clean and free of any pitch or sawdust that tends to build up there and could interfere with how the blade tracks. It's not hard to remove. You can do it with a little steel ruler. Use it as a scraper. You really want to stay away from solvents which could damage the tires. A quick word about buying blades. You don't need to buy expensive ones, but they do need to be sharp. So buy a few at a time, and remember, 3 teeth per inch. Now you can thread the new blade through the slot and onto the wheels. Dial up the tension as you turn the upper wheel by hand. You want that blade to be running dead center on the upper wheel. So adjust the crank that tilts the upper wheel until the body of the blade is centered on the crown of the tire and tracking perfectly. Now let's bring the blade up to final tension. Here's where some woodworkers make a mistake. They use super high tension basically to overcome the fact that they're using the wrong blade or that it's dull. That really high tension is only going to groove these tires and damage them. You don't need all that crazy high tension. The truth is, you just need medium tension, and a good general way to get there is to look at the settings on the back of your saw, but use the setting right below the size of the blade that you have. So I'm going to go to 3/8 for this 1/2 inch blade. Now this isn't an exact science. You only need medium tension, but just to double check that you've got it right, here's a great method. Make sure the guides are totally out of the way, and then hold a ruler up to the blade. You should be able to move the blade about 1/4 inch comfortably with one finger. That looks good. Now, let me give the wheel one more spin just to make sure that the blade is still tracking nice. Okay, that looks good. Now here's the fun part. The great thing about changing a bandsaw blade is that it gives you a chance to get your whole bandsaw set up and dialed in perfectly. So let's get it all set up right. We'll start by moving the blade guides back into position. You want to move them forward until the blocks are just behind the gullets on the blade, no farther. Now we can set the blocks or rollers up against the blade. Start by moving one of the guide blocks so it's just barely touching the blade but not flexing it sideways. Hold it there and tighten down the set screw. Bring the other one up against the blade too with really light pressure. You could even take your finger away as you tighten that set screw. The final check is to give the wheel a spin by hand. On some blades, the little welded area sticks out a little bit, and you want to make sure that that doesn't get caught on the guides. Now we just need to adjust this thrust bearing. You want to bring it up to within about 1/16 inch of the blade. Now do the same thing to the lower guides. Now all you got to do is pop this throat plate back into place and put this little plug back in at the edge of the table. Now that we know the blade is running where it wants to run, we can square up this table. And then adjust the rip fence so it's aligned perfectly with the miter slot. Well, that's it. If you have a 3 tooth per inch blade and it's fresh and sharp and it's tracked right on that upper wheel, it'll never drift and you'll never have to adjust that rip fence again. You're going to be surprised at how well your bandsaw will cut.